The episode archive of Your Creative Push is now easier than ever to navigate. Head to yourcreativepush.com and click episodes at the top. There you'll see all the episodes listed by date and by genre. Every episode of YCP is meant to inspire you, regardless of your creative passion, but you can now easily find the ones that fit your creative medium when you need a little extra push. Your Creative Push, episode 240.
It's invaluable just to sit down for a little bit of time every day, do something that moves you forward, and it will keep you rolling.
Welcome to Your Creative Push, the podcast that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. I'm your host, Young Min Brown, and my guest today is Jane Samuels. Jane is a psychogeographer from the United Kingdom who works in many different disciplines. And in this episode, we talk about many of those different disciplines, including her abandoned buildings project and some of the exploits that she has gotten into while setting up some of that photography. We talk about her drawing and some of the inspiration behind her anatomical landscape series, as well as the difference between those two projects, the immediacy of the photography, as well as the slow burn of the drawing and her need for both. We also talk about a third discipline, her practice of landscape writing and walking writing, and what that allows her to do that visual art does not. We also go deep into some of her resistances, some of the factors that led to her 10-year gap in art, and then what finally brought her back, and then some of the resistances that she still deals with on a daily basis, such as fear, lack of self-confidence, and imposter syndrome, as well as dealing with the things that life throws at you and balancing that with your art. We also talk about the benefits of social media and especially the big social media sites like Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook and what those have done for her creative career. Jane is a special artist who is not afraid to do exactly what her creative inclinations tell her to do or ask her to do. So I really appreciate her coming on to share her journey with you and me. So sit back and relax and enjoy my conversation with Jane Samuels. Hi, Jane. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you for having me along.
Oh, well, thank you very much for being here. We usually start out by I give you an opportunity to just give us a brief bio and kind of how you got to the point you are today creatively.
Okay, so I started out way too many years ago.
Way too many years ago?
Yeah, way too many. When I did kind of A-level, so I did 3 art A-levels, I was really lucky that I was able to just dive straight into the art at the age of 16 with no pressure from my parents to do, science or something. And loved it, had the most wonderful teachers who did all the right things and made me excited about what I was doing. And from there, I went through kind of the education route through a degree, and then after that to an MA, all in art. And each level of that kind of gave me a level of professionalism. So by MA, I was able to start kind of going out into galleries and know vaguely what I was doing, only vaguely. And in between all of that, I started teaching as well. So I was teaching in prisons over here in the UK.
Ooh.
That was so much fun.
Was that intimidating or scary at all, though?
Yeah, it could be. Like some pretty hairy stuff happened while I was there, and you get a bit too used to it too. So sometimes things happen and it takes you a few days to stop going, that's just prison, and start going, that was terrible. Which was part of the reason I left, because I didn't want to become desensitized to violence, really.
Mm-hmm.
But teaching in that environment and teaching art is the most wonderful thing. It's giving people freedom in a space where they're completely confined. Out of everything, that's still one of the favourite things I've ever done. So I came out of that because there were some issues around violence, and I started working with sex offenders, and it wasn't the safest environment.
Sure.
So from there, I got into politics. So I did 10 years of grassroots politics and completely ignored art for most of that time, and kind of had thrown everything I had into social justice and all of that good stuff. But 10 years in, suddenly realised that all of this education that I'd done, all of this teaching that I was doing, I'd completely ignored this stuff that was in my heart. So it's only, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago that I started concentrating on art again. and things have come on since then. So yeah, since then it's been like social media has been amazing and useful, and mostly I've been able to finally just have my own studio, do my own stuff, and do the work that I really want to do.
Cool, and I want to get back into social media in a moment, but I wanted to talk about that 10-year gap, because that's something that I'm really interested in with a lot of the different people that I've been talking to, these long gaps that exist. Do you think that was on purpose, like that you were almost purposely ignoring your art, or was it just like your interests kind of changed and you just went with it?
A bit of everything, a bit of both those things. I fell into politics because there were things that I saw that I was really worried about, and that I wanted to do something about, and that became more important for a while than doing the stuff that was for me. And at the same time, there's a healthy, very unhealthy dose of fear involved in art practice for me. Like, it scares the shit out of me. I'm terrified of failing, always have been. And it's easier just to not do it and fail than it is to do it, to not do it and not fail, than it is to do it and risk that failure. So
sure, I
avoided it for 10 years as well, I think.
Well, that's a completely understandable reaction. And what do you think was the thing that brought you back to it after a decade? Realising
that I had to. It got to the point where there was all this unrealised stuff in my head and a real need to do something with it. And it was a case of feeling the need to kind of connect with people in other ways as well. So my work is still political. My work is still, it's about connecting people and places. So it's a continuation, but it's adding the stuff that I needed to add as well.
Right. And kind of getting into that, what was your first project that you got back into when you kind of got back into art? Was that the Abandoned Buildings project?
Yeah, it was.
Okay. And as you mentioned, it does have like political ties into it and like social ties. So can you explain for the listeners that project and kind of where that stemmed from?
Yeah, so the Abandoned Buildings project was something that actually started originally in my MA, so it was before that 10-year hiatus, but was completely put on ice and then started up again. It was kind of before urbex became incredibly trendy, and everyone was doing it. I started going into forums, seeing what some people were doing, and the connections that it had to things like place and space and ownership and legality and illegality of going into those spaces. And there was something really exciting about that for me. And I always need that bit of danger and a little bit of kind of, am I going to get into trouble here? And the answer is yes, I am. So I started going into abandoned buildings, usually historic buildings, but sometimes domestic. And trying to find the stories of those places that had been locked away and that weren't being spoken about, but also do it in a way that was very conscious that these were real people with real lives as well. So I would go into the building and do a sort of initial explore, make sure it was safe enough to take other people in as well, and then take a gang of other people in with me, usually just long-suffering friends. At the time, I was working in a Buddhist centre, so I would take this poor gaggle of Buddhists all dressed as giant rabbits with me to get arrested. But they were fine with that. And so we would then find the little narratives in the place, the little stories, the letter that had been written and left behind, the photograph underneath the floorboards, little echoes of the people who had lived there. There was an asylum, a hospital asylum, where people had drawn on the wallpaper just these wonderful little reminders of who'd been there. And then we'd find ways of not telling the stories, because how can you? They're just traces. But kind of responding to them in a way that would make other people engage with that as well.
Do you have to find evidence to tell the story, or do you go by like kind of the feeling that the place gives you?
A little bit of both. It depends what's there. Some buildings you go in, it's kind of like the Marie Celeste, it's just been left. There was a house from the 1970s and there was still kind of state-supplied baby milk and things on the tables, just the most amazing historical objects. And in other places they're gutted and empty, and really the main story there is the the way nature has taken them over and kind of started to overtake those hints of humanity, which is another theme that's really important to me.
And are you ever terrified to be in these places? Like, is it ever like, do you get like nervous energy just for like not only the thrill of it, but like, I imagine just like the creepiness of it too?
Yeah, I don't think I'd do it if that wasn't the case.
Right.
I've fallen through a few floorboards, and that's kind of par for the course. And, you know, generally my own stupidity going that bit too far into a clearly dodgy room or whatever it might be. But, you know, there's always that cat and mouse game with security guards and, you know, a pack of dogs looking for you while you hide in the wardrobe. There's always those moments.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And they become part of that story of how do people find their own bits of history? How do they go into places like these hospitals where hundreds of people lived and sometimes terrible, genuinely awful things happened to them that were very unjust and very wrong? And you go in and you try and find these stories, and then someone kind of comes at you with a dog, and there's a very clear link between those two things, for me at least.
Right. How many times have you been arrested?
Politically or just for art?
Let's say just for like this sneaking around and lurking in abandoned buildings. It's amazing. We've never been fully arrested. So the police have chased us around. Knock on wood.
Yeah, totally. We get caught and apprehended and removed and thrown out pretty regularly. Mm-hmm. My favourite of those ever was a long time ago now, again in one of the big hospitals, and I had 4 guys with me. So the reason that they're animals is that there's an Irish folk tale about these creatures called the puka who can shapeshift between animal and human form, and they come out when people have gone. So they seem like a really good way of telling these stories. So I'd have this little troop of Buddhists who are dressed as giant rabbits and big horses and all sorts of nonsense, and the police came to the window and saw us all stood in there, and I think got a bit of a shock. Absolutely. Yeah, and did lots of kind of hand motions telling us to get out. Mm-hmm. And we kind of said that we would, and then realised that we were lost. So for about half an hour, they, I'm sure, just saw us kind of marching past windows, still dressed as giant animals, occasionally kind of stopping and waving at them and then disappearing again and appearing at another window.
That must have been terrifying.
So I think, yeah, it's the danger is there, but it's very comedic. And I think as soon as they realise that you're an artist and you're just some idiot doing a thing, they're less worried about you being there as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any type of like paranormal experience, or like have you ever had something that you can't explain? I mean, I know it's like creepy to be like either alone or with like other people in a place that you're not supposed to be, in a place that has like lots of weird noises and stuff like that, but would you say that you've had any like paranormal or experiences with what you might call ghosts?
I don't think so, you know. I think it's quite grounded. It's quite a sort of earthy experience. It's very much about wood and stone and people for me. So I get the whisper of them, but it's not a paranormal thing. It's a very human sort of interior thing. It's very much a case of sensing what's gone on and trying to piece that together. So it's an echo, but it's not paranormal.
Gotcha.
But it's very eerie. There was a place where there'd been a children's ward. I'm always really careful about not using names if I find them in places. Mm-hmm. But there was one from a very long time ago where they put names up above children's ward beds. And I've been listening to a lot of Nick Cave, so a lot of that kind of deep south, dark gothic stuff. And this name of Sarah Slaughter came up.
Oh my God.
Which sent me on this whole kind of very gothic narrative, which was a lot of fun. But also, again, you can't get too far away from the fact that that's an actual human being who went through some really serious and real things. So you can't get too romantic and too fantastical about it, because it's real people. Right.
Back in college, my friends and I, and I've written about this, we went to this place called Pennhurst. It was an insane asylum that got shut down because of the mistreatment of the patients. But I didn't really know all that. We just kind of decided to go and lurk around this place. And I think nowadays they actually turned it into like a haunted attraction during Halloween time. But at this point, it was just like literally an abandoned insane asylum. And we walked around. It's like in the middle of the woods. We like snuck in there. It's very creepy. It's across this big campus, and they're all connected by underground tunnels. And there was probably like 10 of us, and we were all walking through the underground tunnels, like not for an artistic project, just to be like stupid college kids, like being where we weren't supposed to be. Yeah. But anyway, all my friends ran away for some reason, and it was me and this other kid, and I got like slapped in the back of the neck by like something, like this ice cold like hand, right? So that's what it felt like, at least. Maybe I'm just a huge wimp or whatever, but all I remember is just running through the woods after that happened. So, and I didn't believe in ghosts or anything like that before then. And I don't know what happened to me, but something very strange happened to me that night. And I definitely believe in ghosts. And I get the chills whenever I see your art, whenever I see your photography. And I love your project and what you're doing. And I think it's important, too, to also tell the story of these places and to kind of try to put yourself or to put the viewer in that place and to try to convey the emotion and the story behind that place. I think it's really cool and definitely something for people to check out.
Thank you.
And kind of going along with that, can you talk about your anatomical landscapes? Something a little bit different, but along the same line as far as trying to tell a story of a place.
Yeah, it comes from the same place. It's still about connection. It's still about legality and illegality. Here in the UK, we have a lot of land that you can walk on, but a lot of it is owned privately. So things like the moors here have private landholders, but you have the right to roam, which means that you're able to kind of go and do all kinds of nice activities up there. But there is a lot of private land as well that just sits there. And there's long been a debate about how landscape should kind of belong to everyone, in that at least it should be there to be used. So that runs kind of through the heart of a lot of the landscape work that I do. And I do quite a lot of trespassing as a result.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sensing a theme.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Generally, though, on the moors, no one cares. You kind of go, right, I'm going to go and do a big trespass, but it's just you in the middle of the moors and no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
But, I was there and I did it. So it's a narrative work. So each piece is based on a single place. And usually it's a single visit or a mishmash of experiences in each visit. Because land shapes people and people shape land, I've combined human anatomy with those places. So there's a human heart, for example, with a place called Dovedale, which then kind of takes you through this landscape, through this sort of shape of the heart. One with lungs. There's lots of flora and fauna that you find in each place as well. And really, they just grew out of a need to draw again. I needed to do something that was going to take me forever to do again, because the immediacy of photography is lovely, but it's not what I have in my heart. So, yeah, it was an excuse to just sit in a room and listen to music and drink coffee and draw for lots of hours.
Right. And then thirdly, you have this thing that you do where you walk and basically then write.
Yeah.
So it's like even like a third way to express yourself.
Yeah. So kind of landscape writing and walking writing is at the heart of most psychogeography. It's part of the research that I do before I do anything, really, is get the narrative straight in my head, get the place straight in my head. And descriptive writing is a way of making, I think, probably one of the best ways of making places real. It's really immersive. People can really lose themselves in it, probably even more than a photograph or a drawing, because they conjure up images themselves right the way through reading. So it's central to a lot of psychogeographers and a lot of the work that they do. And it's definitely central to mine. So it started off through research, and it's become a practice in itself, really. And currently I'm writing for a book at the moment. My deadline's in a week.
Oh my gosh.
I'm right against the wall.
Well, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah. No, it's lovely to have a break, actually, and stop writing for a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's become something with a life of its own, and that's really nice. And they're also incredibly connected. Photography, drawing, writing are the three legs that kind of all come together to create a whole practice for me.
And which of the three things we've kind of been talking about would you say is like your best way to describe a place?
That's a really hard question because they all do such different things.
Mm-hmm.
Probably writing, but I don't know if I'm good enough yet. So when writers do the work so beautifully that it just takes you there, that's what I'm aiming for, but I really don't know if I'm there yet.
You are.
I'm aiming for it.
You are.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No, but I think you have this. I think everybody has that type of, I'm not good enough yet, or other kinds of things that either have held them back in the past or continues to try to stop them, to try to give them maybe another 10-year gap or whatever. So do you have any other things like that besides like the fear of, not being good enough yet that kind of hold you back?
Absolutely. I mean, what I would say as well about the fear, though, is that I think if you didn't have it, you wouldn't produce the work in the first place. I think if you were really ever happy and satisfied with what you did, you'd probably just stop. Right,
move on.
Yeah, I'm never happy, and I think that's something most artists and writers are familiar with. So it's that process of trying to be better every time.
Right. Still almost embrace that kind of the fear as like a sign that you're on the right path, that that you can continue to do this thing until if you ever reach that point, then you're kind of either done or you've just hit your plateau. Yeah. So like if you kind of still have that thing, you always have somewhere else to go.
Yeah, I think if you can acknowledge it as a thing that's going to happen, whether you like it or not, you find a way of working with it. And in terms of other things that come up, so, I mean, self-confidence, imposter syndrome, absolutely. People contact me to do things like this or to do work with them for brands, that sort of thing, especially because Instagram has blown up a little bit. And generally I go, really? Why? And then I go, yeah, okay, that would be great. And then I spend a week going, I can't do that, that's ridiculous. So there's this real cycle that I know that I go through, and then I just have to do it anyway. The other thing that gets in my way is life. I don't make a living out of this. It helps a little bit, but not enough. And I have to do a day job, which I also really love. So I have to fit my work around that. And I do still do politics stuff. And recently, in the past year, my mum's been really ill. She got cancer just over a year ago.
I'm sorry.
We're getting there. But it's amazing how stuff like that can just stop you in your tracks. And it's very hard to get rolling again. When really big life stuff happens, I found myself for 6 months going, just why am I doing this? It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
But I've worked through that as well. People say things like, okay, well, when this is all over, you can channel it into your work and your work will be better. And I kind of want to punch them when they say that.
Right.
Because you can't beautify this thing. It's awful, and I don't think it will make my work better. I think it's just a really shitty thing to go through, and I'm having to find ways of working around it. So that's been a learning process for me.
Yeah, life can sometimes just grab you and pull you into a completely different direction or just stop you in your tracks. And I think that, it is tough because when somebody that's not going through what you're going through tries to give you advice on, what you can do with your work, it's tough to take that advice or whatever. But I do think that when people go through these kind of life situations where, your art really does take a back seat to handling real life. It's true. You need to put stuff on hold sometimes to not completely abandon it, to know that it will come back later. You can get back to it later, and it does matter, but it just doesn't matter right now as much. Yeah.
And the beauty of it is that it is always there. There might be jobs you can never go back to. There might be other things that just end, but your creativity and your process, it doesn't go away.
Right. Like you did, you can put it on ice for 10 years or whatever, get back to it. You might be rusty and you might have maybe, like you said, missed a couple opportunities, but you can get back to it, and it's not something you have to completely abandon like the buildings that you find yourself in. Well, you mentioned that you got back to your art and your creativity because of all this unrealized stuff that you had in your head. Would you say that now, after 4 or 5 years, getting back to it, that you've kind of realized all those things, or are there the new realizations that you've had that you want to get to still, or are you kind of along the path?
I'm along the path. The beauty of creativity is that it kind of creates more creativity as you kind of travel along, more stuff comes up. And so, yeah, I hope the path won't end. It's just a case of moving on from one thing to the next now. But I feel like I'm giving it the life that it needed to have, and that's really satisfying. Very
cool. And way back in the beginning of this interview, you mentioned the beauty of social media. So I was wondering if we could get into that a little bit. How have you kind of utilized your social media to help you move forward in your creative career?
So I accidentally joined Instagram one day about...
Accidentally?
Yeah, I've been so resistant to social media. Even to smartphones. I was probably the last person I knew to get a smartphone, was adamant that wasn't something I needed. Mm-hmm. And now I live on Twitter. It's sad. So, not so much Facebook. I kind of hate Facebook. But...
Most people do.
Yeah, I find it's not as easy to reach out into the world and find wonderful things on Facebook, whereas on Twitter it really is.
Right. They want you to put dollars into it before you can reach all the people that you want to reach.
Yeah, and it's much harder to find people as well, because there are so many people out there who are being so generous with their work and with other people's work. They're sharing and they're talking. And on Twitter, they're just there. You go and find them and you join the conversation, and it's quite a magical space, especially for someone like me, because I'm an absolute recluse when it comes to networking. I hate it. Mm-hmm. The idea of doing that in person, I'm just like this nerdy person who doesn't really want to go into gallery spaces and exhibition spaces and have to network. There's an idea of help. But I can do that on Twitter. It's actually nice. So it's a really good tool for me. And Instagram, I've got about, 13,000 followers now? Mm-hmm. And I've no idea how, so I can't help anyone with that, I'm afraid. But it's been a really incredibly useful tool. I hit about 10k and suddenly people started contacting me. Since then, it's been a fairly steady conversation with people about the things that I would and wouldn't like to do, which has been surprising and lovely.
I think a lot of people listening have that attitude where it's scary to put your stuff out there on social media. And it's also scary to reach out to people and to self-promote. It feels icky sometimes.
Yeah.
But I think the idea is just at least be on the platforms, or at least the platforms that feel comfortable to you.
Yeah.
Where you feel comfortable enough to reach out to other people, or to be there, to be open and available to other opportunities that might pop up. And I think the advice there is to put it out there, even if you don't feel quite comfortable, and just see what happens.
Absolutely. And just the ease of that is so lovely. There's, I go through exhibition processes here in the UK, and it's a long process and it's pretty arduous, whereas I can put new work up on Twitter or Instagram and immediately there are 13,000 people who have a response to that. And it's immediate, and it's a conversation between you and them that is very different to a gallery space. And it's reaching people often who wouldn't necessarily go into a gallery space, and I really like that about it.
Yeah, anytime you can find a way to connect with that audience, the people that aren't like actively looking for galleries or aren't actively a part of that scene, that's always a big plus.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a way of reaching people who have lots to give you as well. There's always a lovely conversation that comes out of it, but you wouldn't necessarily have if you put your work up in a gallery and then left. Yes, you're going to get negative feedback online, but you also get people with excellent suggestions, great ideas, wonderful collaborations coming up to you constantly because they have direct access to you. And that's a really nice thing too, usually.
Yeah, usually. Well, and then the immediacy of photographs and visual art, sharing that is one thing because of, stuff like Instagram where that's like the whole point. How about your writing? Like, how have you been able to kind of share that or promote that or get that out there?
I found that blogging it on my own website and then sharing it on other platforms, usually Twitter, because I now have a network of incredibly generous people. So when I put stuff out, they share it for me, they comment on it, they quote it, they get it out to their followers as well. And if you're able to find that community and you help each other, that's a really lovely way of doing it. People are really ready to share your content because everyone needs content. And if you share theirs too, that's a really lovely collaboration, and it's very easy.
Before we let you go, I was wondering, did you have any resources, anything that like people, books, movies, YouTube clips, anything else that people could draw inspiration from?
Yeah, loads. This is the bit I've been waiting for.
Oh, great. Here we go.
Okay, so I thought I'd keep it social media centered because I knew that would probably be something we'd be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I'd say is just really make sure that you find your people on social media, whatever it is you're interested in, whatever type of creativity or art it is that you're doing, they are there. So go and find them, get involved with them. And you'll find they're really open to talking to you about it because they love it as much as you do. So for me, people who are dealing with landscape, the culture of those things, psy artists as well. So lots of people dealing with, animal anatomy and lichen and bugs, all that good stuff. Are kind of my community. People like Dr. Imi Smith, who is doing the most wonderful psy art that's just really innovative and interesting. People like Morag Rose, who's a friend of mine here in Manchester. She put together a thing called the Loiterers Resistance Movement. It goes by the LRM, usually. And it's a group of walkers and thinkers and artists and writers who kind of go into the city and explore and do little interventions and think about the politics of space. And they're just a really good, radical, political, grassroots arts group, but really with compassion at the heart of it, which is absolutely straight from Morag. I love her, and you guys all should too. So
okay.
You'll find her on Twitter at the LRM, and she's well worth a look.
And so did you know about her and that whole kind of movement before you did your kind of walking tours?
Yeah, we actually met in political spaces. So she was involved with a social centre in the city that all kind of grassroots politics was happening. There was refugee groups and LGBTQ groups, all sorts of interesting people coming in and doing good work. She was somebody who was very involved in the running of that, and it was around the time that she was setting up the LRM, so that was a time that I got involved with them as well. And she's been kind of the heart of walking theory in Manchester ever since, and kind of as a woman as well, doing psychogeography, which can be very male and white and middle class. She's pretty important, I think. And then I'd go from maybe her and the LRM to Fife Psychogeography. And they're really worth a look on Twitter. They've just produced a book called From Hill to Sea, which is just this beautiful, immersive, land-based writing. They're on Twitter at FIFEPSY, FifeSci. And I'm suggesting them just because they're so bloody generous. They're just really incredibly good at sharing other people's work, being excited about what other people do, as well as sharing their own stuff. And they're a really lovely hub to go and find this sort of work. And then finally, I would just suggest getting involved with some good reading. So people like Will Self, Robert McFarlane's really hot at the moment, but for very good reason. He writes beautiful, immersive stuff. And there's a raft of landscape writers who I can't recommend highly enough. Just go out, find your thing, whether it be urban or rural, and kind of get lost in it.
Very cool. And yeah, I think you bring up really good advice is to really be active about finding those like-minded people or like-minded organizations, not only to find inspiration from them and they can find inspiration from you too, but to collaborate and to build a relationship, it just, all it does is build excitement and build authority around what you're doing.
Absolutely.
And just to have like-minded people that are into the same thing that you're into can definitely help to kind of spur you on in your creative endeavor. So we'll link all those up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Jane Samuels.
Fantastic.
And Jane, it's time for the final push.
Mhm.
And this is where I ask you to reach through the microphone and grab the shoulder of one of the listeners that you've already really inspired today and just give them your best final words of advice and really push them to pursue their own creative passions.
Okay, am I allowed 2 points?
Yes. You can have 50.
Exciting. Okay, so
Ready.
my first one is 5 minutes is better than no minutes. So looking at everything that we just talked about, the way life gets in the way, the way, day jobs are important too, beans have to be paid for. It's so important to remember that if you manage to do 5 minutes of work and that's all you do, you've moved it forward. And it's invaluable just to sit down for a little bit of time every day, if you can. As little as it is. It could be 1 minute, it could be just a bit of arranging of papers, do something that moves you forward, and it will keep you rolling. The other thing is know why you're doing it. So understanding what the motivation is for the work that you're doing, where the love comes from, what is it that you're aiming for, will help you stay on the right track. I've done jobs back in the day that were purely about making money from art, and I hated them because I didn't love what I was doing. And now that I've put the things that I love back into it, I'm making a lot less money, but the balance is right, and I'm going to keep rolling. So that'd be my 2 tips to keep you going. Make sure that you know what you love and that that's what you do. And remember to just take 5 minutes out, even on the busiest days.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, like you said, even 1 minute. I think there's a lot of value in having a streak, a streak of doing something. And a lot of times we're kind of as good as we were the day before, or we follow the same habits that we followed the day before. And that's why these long, 10-year gaps happen. Because, all right, well, I didn't do it yesterday. I didn't do it the day before. Why do it today? Why do it tomorrow? I'll get to it later. But I think even if, like you said, like before you go to bed, you realize you didn't do anything to like further your creative career or, move the needle a little bit, just find some way to either, even if it's writing down the ideas that you want to get to tomorrow, even if it's writing a list of the creative things that you need to get to tomorrow, I think that is really important to at least get your mind thinking in that way at least once a day. It's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully no more 10-year hiatuses after that.
Absolutely. Yeah, you don't want to get double digits in the years, but it's okay if that does happen, or if it's happened to people that are listening now and know that, the creative thing is still on ice. Like you said, the ice doesn't completely melt. It might melt a little bit, and you might need to do a little extra work to get back to the point you were at when you left it. But it's always there waiting for you. It's never completely abandoned you. Yeah,
and just starting it again. I think if you think you're going into some big project after an amount of time out like that, it's very daunting. But if you say, I'm going to spend 5 minutes thinking about art today, that's a really nice way to just kind of ease your way back in.
Absolutely. Well, Jane, I know how busy you are, and I know you have a deadline coming up, so I really do appreciate you coming on the show today and for giving us that push. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was fun. Of course. It was fun. And you can find Jane on her website, which is jane-samuels.com, or you can find her on Instagram or Twitter as Jane Samuels. And we'll have everything, as I said before, linked up at today's show notes page at yourcreativepush.com/Jane Samuels. Jane, thanks again. Thank you. Oh, I told you Jane was awesome. I just love what she does. Her photography, her walking/writing, and then her art. 3 different practices that require a different set of skills, that require her to use different senses, and they're all created at a different pace. And they also offer a different pace to the viewer or to the reader or to the audience. Yet they all attempt to do the same basic thing: to bring life into a place, to tell the story of a place, even if that story is an estimation on her behalf and built off of a feeling. But I hope that it inspired you to do this. Explore. Not explore your surroundings. Well, yeah, do that. Explore your surroundings. But what I mean is to explore internally, to explore any kind of inclination that you get, any idea that you get, even if it's something new. something that you've never done before, even if it's poetry and you've never written a poem before, or to draw a picture, even if you've never drawn a stick figure in your life, or to put thought into taking a photograph, or even better, to set up a photo shoot with your friends, just to explore new ways to convey messages that perhaps is super easy for you to convey with your usual creative outlet. Find new ways to convey those messages, and that will open up new facets of your creativity. And then you can really start to dabble and play. And when you build these multiple ways of expressing yourself or expressing your message, those things will build off of each other, and it will only make your original, your OG way of creating that much better. And I think one of the biggest ways that it really allows you to explore those differences, like Jane was saying in the episode, is pace. Where photography is very sudden, it's very quick, writing allows her to slow down the pace and really open up the visualization for the reader. So I want to challenge you to think of new ways to change the pace, to make it faster, to make it slower, to make it different, to go in a different direction with your art. And I think you'll see that that might require you to get out there, to explore and find a new way that might not be comfortable for you to convey your message, but to try it anyway, even if you might suck at it, even if you might be a noob, even if you might feel totally unprepared for this new way to express yourself. Just try it. Nobody has to see it. That's the constant message of this podcast. Nobody has to see your experimentation except for you. And you might be shocked at the different ways that it opens up your brain when you get back to the thing that you're most comfortable with. So that's my challenge for you after the podcast is over. Really brainstorm and think of ways that you can dig deeper and change the pace. On Monday's show, we've got a fun one for you. We've got Andy J. Miller, a.k.a. Andy J. Pizza, from the Creative Pep Talk podcast. I know that a lot of you listen to this podcast. I myself listen to this podcast for the past 6, 7, 8 months. He is a wonderful podcaster. If you love this podcast, you're going to love Creative Pep Talk. Andy is a talented illustrator as well as a talented podcaster, and he killed it in this episode of Your Creative Push. If you want to check out more about Andy, you can find him at andyj.pizza, or you can check out creativepeptalk.com. I promise you will not regret it. Or you can wait to hear him on this podcast and then explore further. We'll have some suggestions for you if you want to start listening to his podcast, some places that you can start. But that is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you were inspired to go and get your work done. So go and get it done, and we will be here for you on Monday. If you need the push again, have a wonderful, productive, creative weekend. I love you guys so much. Go and get some amazing work done, and we will see you next time. Bye. Never miss a push. Head to yourcreativepush.com/subscribe to find the easiest way for you to subscribe to the podcast.